Imagine walking through the misty hills of Ireland on a cold, silent night. The air is still, and the fog clings to the earth, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. Suddenly you hear an eerie, high-pitched wail that sends a chill down your spine. Could it be the wind? Or is it something far more sinister? Something that has haunted the dreams of many for centuries. Today we delve deep into one of Ireland's most famous supernatural legends, the Banshee. But here's the thing, the Banshee isn't just another ghost story. Oh no, this is no ordinary spirit. The Banshee is said to be an omen, a messenger of death. When she cries, it's not for herself, it's for you, or someone you love. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why hearing her cry is the last thing you ever want to experience. So, where did the legend of the Banshee come from? To understand her story, we need to travel back centuries into the rich and complex world of Irish mythology, a world where spirits, gods, and supernatural beings roamed the landscape, influencing the lives of mortals. The term Banshee comes from the Irish words I pronounced Banshee, meaning woman of the fairy mound. These fairy mounds, known as Cd pronounced she, were believed to be ancient burial sites, places where the supernatural and mortal worlds intertwined. In ancient Irish belief, fairies weren't always the delicate, winged creatures of modern stories. They were far more powerful, otherworldly beings that could be as helpful as they were terrifying. Often seen as messengers from the land of the dead, these fairies had connections to both life and death, and they didn't play by human rules. The Banshee is one of the most mysterious of these figures, existing somewhere between a ghost and a fairy, with her purpose forever tied to death. The Banshee, specifically, was believed to be a spirit, or a fairy woman, who would foretell death by her sorrowful wailing or keening. Now, keening isn't just a sound, it's an ancient and deeply emotional form of lamentation. In Old Ireland, it was a ritual, a haunting cry of grief performed by women, often hired to mourn the dead at funerals. Their voices would echo through the hills as they sang of loss, sorrow, and the finality of death. But the Banshee's keening was different. It wasn't a mourning of the past, but a chilling prelude to the future. Her cry echoed not at funerals, but in the dark, cold hours before a death would even occur. Legend has it that the Banshee's cry was reserved for families of ancient Irish noble lines, old clans like the O'Neills, O'Briens, and O'Connors. Each family supposedly had its own Banshee who would appear when a family member was close to death. Her presence wasn't meant to frighten but to mourn and forewarn. The Banshee wasn't an enemy, but rather a harbinger of what was to come. Her sorrowful wail, a personal lament for the life that was about to be lost. Her keening was a deeply personal act, a kind of mourning for you, even before you passed. It was as if the Banshee herself was grieving the inevitable before anyone else knew it was coming. However, the legends don't just end there. Stories differ on who hears the Banshee's cry. In some tales, it's only the person destined to die who hears it. In others, the Banshee's wail is heard by family members, a final warning that death is on its way. There are even versions of the myth where the Banshee appears not to the family directly, but to friends or neighbors, a cryptic signal that someone they know is about to pass on. But here's the twist. Not everyone who hears the Banshee's wail is marked for death. Sometimes, it's a warning meant for those close to you, a message that death is drawing near for a loved one. In these cases, the cry becomes even more heartbreaking, a chilling reminder that loss is inevitable. But no matter who hears her mournful song, one thing remains constant. When the Banshee cries, death always follows. Her voice is the prelude to fate, a sound that echoes through the ages, carrying with it the weight of finality. But what does the Banshee look like? Well, here's where the stories get interesting. The Banshee's appearance is as varied and mysterious as the legends themselves, shifting from one chilling form to another depending on the tale being told. In some stories, she's described as an ethereal beauty, a young woman with flowing, ghostly robes, often in shades of white or silver. Her hair, long and unbound, is said to shimmer in the moonlight as if each strand is woven from the mist itself. Her pale skin gleams with an otherworldly glow, and her eyes, although beautiful, are filled with sorrow, reflecting the endless grief she carries with her. This vision of the Banshee as a youthful and hauntingly beautiful woman connects her to the fairy traditions of Ireland, where fairies often appear in deceptive, mesmerizing forms. Her appearance, both alluring and unsettling, makes her a creature of contrasts, beautiful, yet terrifying in the knowledge of what her presence means. In this form, the Banshee becomes a tragic figure, mourning not just the loss of life, but perhaps the loss of her humanity, tied eternally to death's shadow. However, not all stories paint the Banshee as a youthful spirit. In other accounts, she is described as an old, withered crone, far more terrifying in her appearance. Her face is wrinkled and gaunt, her hair matted and gray from centuries of sorrow, eyes red and swollen from endless weeping. She is the very embodiment of grief. Her once beautiful features are now twisted with pain, reflecting the centuries she spent mourning for those who were about to die. Her mouth, open wide to let out her piercing wail, is said to be sharp, as though her voice could cut through the stillness of the night air, like a blade. Her transformation into this crone figure represents a different side of Banshee's mythology, the sorrow and suffering that comes with witnessing so much death. This form is less about beauty and more about anguish. Her appearance is almost a reflection of the grief she carries. Her body twisted and worn from the weight of countless lives lost. But it doesn't stop there. The Banshee's shape is as fluid as the mist she's often said to appear in. Some legends go even further, suggesting that the Banshee doesn't always take human form at all. There are stories where she is said to appear as an animal, most often a crow, weasel, or hare. These creatures, tied deeply to Celtic folklore, were often associated with witchcraft, magic, and the supernatural. The crow, with its harsh caw and ominous presence, was seen as a messenger of death. The weasel, stealthy and elusive, represented cunning and transformation. And the hare, often linked to the fairy world, was believed to be able to move between this world and the next. These animal forms allow the Banshee to be even more elusive, blending into the natural world as a subtle, yet powerful reminder of death's approach. After all, what could be more unnerving than realizing that the creature you see at the edge of the forest, or perched in a tree outside your window, might not be just an animal but a harbinger of your fate? So the next time you hear a crow cawing late at night, or catch sight of a shadowy animal disappearing into the woods, you might want to listen a little closer. It could be more than just nature, it could be the Banshee, watching and waiting. But let's talk about the most terrifying part of the Banshee, the cry. It's the sound that has haunted the imagination of countless people throughout history. Descriptions of the Banshee's wail vary, depending on the legend or personal account. But one thing is always consistent: it's haunting, bone-chilling, and unlike any sound you've ever heard. Some describe it as a low, mournful sobbing, almost like the quiet weeping of someone who has lost everything. A sound so full of sorrow that it seems to echo the very depths of grief and despair, making the air feel thick with sadness. Others, however, describe it very differently. They say the Banshee's cry is not a soft lament, but a piercing, high-pitched scream that cuts through the stillness of the night like a knife. It's the kind of scream that chills you to your very core, a scream so loud, so unnerving, that it could stop your heart for a moment. This isn't just a scream of fear, it's a scream of loss and foreboding. It carries with it the weight of the death that's to come, a sound that can't be ignored once it reaches your ears. There are even stories where the Banshee's cry is said to be so sorrowful, so filled with the pain of 1,000 losses, that it can drive a person mad. Imagine hearing a wail so eerie, so drenched in grief, that it doesn't just fill the air, it burrows into your mind, wrapping itself around your thoughts until it consumes you entirely. Some say that this is why the Banshee doesn't need to be seen to be feared. It's the sound alone that makes her terrifying, because her voice carries a message that you can't escape: death is near. Imagine this: you're alone in the dead of night. The world around you is eerily quiet, with not even the faintest breeze stirring the trees. The moon is hidden behind clouds, and all you can hear is the sound of your footsteps on the gravel path beneath you. Suddenly you hear it, faint at first, a soft cry in the distance. Maybe it's the wind, you think, but then it grows louder, the cry more distinct, a sound full of sadness that sends a chill down your spine. With every step, the sound follows you, growing closer and louder, until it feels like it's right next to you, just out of sight. The hairs on the back of your neck stand up, and your breath quickens. What would you do? Would you have the courage to stay and listen, or would you run, hoping to escape that chilling wail? And remember, her cry isn't just a random noise. It's not something you can brush off as an unsettling sound in the distance. The Banshee's cry is a warning, a signal that a death is near. Whether it's a scream or a sob, whether it's faint or deafening, one thing is certain when you hear her: someone's life is about to end. And the terrifying truth: you'll never know for sure if it's yours or someone you love until it's too late. But is the Banshee just a myth? Is she simply a figure from ancient folklore meant to scare people? Or is there something more to these eerie tales? What if the Banshee isn't just a story, but a real presence that has been haunting the hills of Ireland for centuries. The truth is, while many dismiss her as a mere legend, there are countless stories of people who claim to have heard or even seen her. These accounts span across generations, from medieval times to modern-day encounters. For those who believe, the Banshee is no myth. She's a harbinger of death that walks among us, her cries still echoing through the night.